They say the most dangerous person in any room isn't the loudest one. It's the quiet one in the corner who has been watching, waiting, and documenting everything. For 12 years, that person was me. And for 12 years, I let them look right through me. That was my choice. My patience. My plan. Until the day they handed me the one thing I never asked for, a reason to stop being quiet. My name is not important. What matters is what I did, what I built. And what happened the morning they decided a woman who had kept a billion-dollar company out of federal prison was a legacy function that needed to be sunset. Those were the exact words used. I remember them clearly because I wrote them down. I write everything down. But let's go back to the beginning. Back to a Monday morning that started like every other Monday, under the hum of fluorescent lights, behind a desk no one decorated, in a cubicle no one noticed. The office smelled like bad coffee and worse decisions, and by 8:42 a.m., I was already holding 3 regulatory calls at once, cross-referencing license renewal schedules across 4 different jurisdictions, and trying to explain to a junior analyst why the word compliance couldn't just be replaced with vibes in official documentation. That's when I heard the voice. That particular voice that always seemed to arrive on a wave of oat milk and unearned confidence. It belonged to Derek Holt, VP of Innovation and Strategic Transformation. A title so vague it could mean literally anything and legally required nothing. He strutted past my desk like a man who had once watched a TED Talk and decided he was the TED Talk. He glanced at my screen and smiled the kind of smile that told you he'd already decided you weren't worth understanding. You know, he said, not really to me but at me, the way people talk to furniture. AI is going to handle all of this in about 5 minutes. The whole regulatory bottleneck? Dead. We're pivoting to agile everything. He sipped his drink. Red tape is so last decade. I smiled. The kind of smile women have perfected over centuries of being dismissed by men who would not survive a single week doing their job. And yet, I said flatly, turning back to my screen, here I am making sure you don't end up in front of a federal judge for a licensing violation. He didn't hear me. He was already gliding toward the glass conference room where he liked to draw colorful diagrams about synergy. His name was on the org chart. Mine was on every compliance certificate that kept this company legally operational across New York, California, Nevada, Colorado, Singapore, and Delaware. There is a difference between the person who takes the credit and the person who does the work. Derek had never once confused the two. He simply assumed one category was his, and the other category was everyone else. I turned back to my screen, triple-checked the timestamp on the Colorado Division of Banking filing I'd just submitted, and logged the confirmation into my private system. The one I maintained off-network, the one no one else knew existed, the one that had been running quietly in the background for 3 years. A personal ledger of every filing, every credential, every jurisdiction-specific requirement tied to my name and my name alone. I didn't build it out of paranoia. I built it out of experience. When you've spent 12 years as the invisible scaffolding of a company, you learn to keep receipts. Around mid-morning, I finished uploading our biannual compliance disclosures, e-signed with credentials backed by a state-issued regulatory bond. Not the company's bond. Mine. That distinction, which no one in that building had ever bothered to understand, would become the most important detail in this entire story. But we'll get to that. At 10:45, Derek posted a meme in the company Slack. It was a cartoon dinosaur with a caption about old-fashioned methods loving bureaucracy. 2 laugh emojis. One from his mentor. I minimized the window. My heart rate did not change. I did not clench my jaw. 12 years of invisible labor had worn my outrage smooth. But I opened a folder on my desktop titled simply, In Case of Idiots. I scanned the first page, verified the dates, and smiled, quietly just to myself, before closing it again. The invitation came at 10:58 a.m. An Outlook calendar request titled Quick Sync, Leadership Alignment. Scheduled for 11:03. Not 11 o'clock. Not 11:15. 11:03. There is a very specific kind of corporate cruelty that announces itself through false precision. I recognized it immediately for what it was. I clicked accept without comment, stood up and turned off my desk heater. By 11:01, I was outside the small conference room near the executive suite. I stepped inside and took in the scene. The CEO, Marcus Webb, sat at the head of the table, a single printed page in front of him, his expression a carefully constructed mask of discomfort. Derek lounged across from him, legs crossed, scrolling on his smartwatch with the relaxed energy of a man who had already won. And in the corner, a woman from HR named Jessica held a clipboard to her chest like a shield she knew wouldn't stop anything. "Vivian," Marcus said, not looking up. "Thanks for coming in." He began reading from the page in a flat monotone, the way people read when the words were written by a lawyer and the speaker has already dissociated from the moment. Operational redundancies, strategic realignment, agile structures, legacy functions. I had heard this language before. It is the dialect of cowardice dressed as innovation. Effective immediately, Derek cut in, unable to help himself, grinning like a man who had confused cruelty with cleverness. "You're being freed up for other opportunities." Freed up. Like I was a parking space. Like 12 years of late nights, emergency filings, and quiet miracles could be condensed into a polite euphemism and slid across a conference table in a small envelope. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I have been interrogated by federal auditors. I have been spoken to by regulatory attorneys who made their careers out of intimidating people. This was amateur theater performed by people who had no idea what they were actually dismantling. "Who's taking over my filings?" I asked. Derek shrugged. "Legal has templates. We'll figure it out." Templates. For a system I built from scratch over a decade. Calibrated to pass 3 separate international audits. Adjusted for 6 jurisdictions with overlapping and sometimes contradicting requirements. They truly genuinely believed it was plug and play. That is the thing about invisible work. When it is done well, it looks simple to the people who never had to do it. I stood slowly. I took one last look around the room. Marcus was checking his phone. Derek had already moved on, tapping at his watch. Jessica wouldn't meet my eyes. "Good luck with the Nevada license renewal," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "Clock resets in 12 days. No grace period." Jessica flinched. Derek did not. I turned, walked back to my desk, and began to pack. One mug, black ceramic, chipped at the handle, white block letters reading, "I have the receipts." A gag gift from a junior associate after I got a state fine reduced from $250,000 to a written warning. I had found an error the regulator made and used it with precision. The kid had taken the credit. I had let him. He needed it more than I did. One framed photo from a compliance conference in Lisbon, 3 years ago. I had skipped the gala dinner that evening to spend 6 hours alone in my hotel room parsing a clause in a multi-country vendor agreement. I found a loophole that would have exposed the company to $4 million in liability. I closed it quietly. The conference got a photo spread in the internal newsletter. My contribution got 3 lines in a litigation budget. My books. My mouse, the one I had brought from home, not because it was ergonomic, but because the scroll wheel made a soft, satisfying click that I had come to need during the long nights when I was reading 700-page regulatory filings alone, trying to prevent the company from committing accidental fraud. And last, the logbook. I flipped to the final page and wrote in neat block letters. Fired. Cause. Legacy function. Impact to regulatory continuity. Catastrophic. I added the date, the names, and one final note, that the Singapore office had not yet received their updated credentials because I had not yet submitted them. And now I would not. The logbook went into the folder. The folder into my bag. I placed my badge flat on the desk, turned once to look at the floor, colleagues peering over monitors like they'd sensed something shift in the atmosphere, nodded once to no one in particular and walked out. No tears. No speech. No drama. Just clean, precise, deliberate exit velocity. They thought they were streamlining. They had no idea they had just amputated their own spine. The office had no name on the door. Just frosted glass, a buzzer, and the kind of quiet that only exists in spaces where serious people do serious work. It sat between a ramen shop and a yoga studio in a building that didn't advertise itself, tucked into a downtown block where no one would think to look for something important. I pressed the buzzer once. A pause. Then the latch clicked open. Renata had not changed. She still wore blazers like armor and moved through rooms like she was always one step ahead of the next problem. She had been VP of risk at a major financial firm before she walked away from it and spent 18 months building something smaller, sharper, and significantly more dangerous. We had stayed in touch, quietly, carefully, off the record. Lunches with no paper trail. Dinners where the conversation started with compliance war stories and ended with hypotheticals about what a perfectly structured operation would actually look like. Today was not a hypothetical conversation. I dropped the folder on her desk. It wasn't thick, just 28 pages, but they landed with the weight of something structural. She scanned the first page, and her expression shifted from curiosity to something that looked almost like admiration. "They're out of compliance in 3 jurisdictions," she said. "Technically 4, I replied, settling into the chair across from her. "But the 4th hasn't filed the trigger yet. Once they do, it'll initiate a cascade." Renata leaned back and exhaled a slow whistle. "The Nevada filings are overdue. 6 days by state standards. 8 by Colorado's framework. They don't know either because Derek shut down my access before the system sent the final alert. My inbox is gone. There's no forwarding. No backup. No one to read the notices that are about to start arriving." She looked at me with the focused calm of someone who has spent a career measuring risk. "You're not here to warn them?" "No," I said. "This is a job interview. But with one condition." She tilted her head. "Go on." "I want to be in the room," I said quietly, "when the licenses collapse." A beat of silence. Then Renata laughed, a real full laugh, not performance. "You want front row seats to the implosion." "I built that structure," I said. "I want to hear the moment they realize what they lost." She didn't flinch, didn't offer a speech about professionalism or optics. She understood, the way very few people actually do, that regulatory compliance isn't bureaucracy. It isn't paperwork. It is the circulatory system of a financial operation. Remove it without a transplant, and the body does not limp. It hemorrhages. "Then let's talk terms," she said. We clinked our coffee mugs. No oat milk, no ceremony, just 2 women who understood exactly what was about to happen, and had already decided what they were going to build on the other side of it. The weekly operations meeting had been rebranded. Derek had changed the title in the calendar from Weekly Ops Sync to Next Gen Alignment Sprint, the same week I was let go. He arrived wearing a vintage band tee under a half-zipped vest, and opened his laptop with the flourish of someone who has confused aesthetic with competence. "All right, team," he said, clapping his hands. "We're lean now. Regulatory is automated. No more bottlenecks. Compliance is a click, not a department." The silence in the room had a texture to it. Lydia from legal blinked. "When you say automated, what exactly does that mean for the bondholder structure?" Derek waved a hand. "We've onboarded 2 SaaS vendors. Smart templates, AI-enabled jurisdiction matching, real-time dashboards. No more single points of failure." He beamed. "Modern solutions." Lydia's jaw worked silently for a moment. "Has anyone spoken with Vivian about her credential handoff?" Her logs were specific. The bond was state-issued, person-bound. "Vivian's email is shut down," Derek said. "She's gone. That's kind of the whole point." He pulled up a slide deck on the projector. The first slide showed a cartoon stick figure crossing out a pile of paper. Out with the old. In with the scalable. In the corner, the new intern raised his hand halfway. "Sorry, just a quick one. Don't we need to refile anything now that the signatory changed? I remember seeing something in the Nevada folder about person-bound credentials." Derek rolled his eyes so visibly you could practically hear them rotate. "It's just paperwork. Legal will file a notice. Regulators aren't sitting around waiting to cancel your license because someone updated their email signature." "Actually," Lydia began. "We have bigger things." Derek cut her off, swiping to the next slide. "The Series D investor call is Thursday. That's what matters." Deep in the system, invisible and patient, the countdown ticked forward. The Nevada license had not been updated because no one had Vivian's login credentials. The Singapore office was operating on an expired authorization. Colorado had already sent a flagging notice to an inbox that no longer existed. The system that Vivian had spent years constructing, with its layered redundancies and jurisdiction-specific requirements, had begun to quietly fold in on itself, one expiration at a time. When legal tried to call her, the line rang twice before delivering a robotic message. This number has been disconnected. Someone from IT offered helpfully that she had wiped her local drives upon exit. No backup. No forwarding. No breadcrumbs. Just absence where a foundation used to be. In the break room, the junior compliance analyst, Sophia, sat with both hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea, staring at the table. She had found the Nevada filing binder that morning. She had read the highlighted clause. She understood exactly what was coming, and there was nothing she could do about it. The investor liaison's email arrived at 3:11 p.m. It was titled Pre-Call Documentation Request Series D. It asked for updated bondholder certificates, proof of active signatory authority, and jurisdictional license compliance for all entities touching U.S. or EU financial data. Derek didn't open it until after dinner. When he did, he forwarded it to Lydia with a single line. "Can we just PDF them something that looks official?" Lydia did not reply. She opened her laptop, created a new document, and began updating her resume. The boardroom had been designed to communicate power. 30-foot screens, carbon-filtered air, matte black surfaces that absorbed light, the way the company had always absorbed the work of people it didn't bother to understand. On Thursday morning, it filled with the specific kind of tension that only exists when people who have been pretending finally have to stop. On the main screen, split between a presentation deck and a live feed, the Singapore investor delegation sat in a row of quiet, dangerous composure. Their lead, a woman named Eliza Fong, had the kind of stillness that meant she had already read everything she needed to read, and was now simply waiting to see how the people across from her would handle it. Derek stood at the head of the table, arms wide, voice smooth. He moved through the deck with the confidence of a man who had rehearsed this performance and had never once considered that the audience might know more than he did. The graphs curved upward. The projections sang. The language was impeccable, scalable, embedded, inevitable. Eliza let him finish. She let the silence sit for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then she said pleasantly, "Thank you. That was energetic. I have one clarification before we proceed." "Of course," Derek said, still smiling. "Our counsel had a question about the cross-licensing structure supporting your U.S. operations," she said, consulting a page in front of her. "Is the regulatory bond for those jurisdictions still held under Ms. Vivian Calloway?" A silence so precise it had edges. Marcus, the CEO, turned slowly toward Lydia. Lydia looked at the table. Derek's smile remained in place, but something behind his eyes flickered. "She's transitioned out," Marcus said carefully, selecting each word like it might explode. Eliza's expression did not shift. "Understood. So who currently holds her regulatory bond status?" No one spoke. Lydia stepped in, her voice controlled and quiet. The bonds in question were person-specific. They're non-transferable without reapplication through each individual state and international authority. Eliza's colleague leaned over and murmured something. She nodded once, then looked back into the camera. "To confirm, you currently do not have an active bondholder for your cross-jurisdictional financial compliance." Derek jumped. "It's more of a clerical technicality. The systems are running, the automation is in place." Eliza raised one hand. A single gesture. Derek stopped mid-sentence. "Without an active bondholder, your operation is functioning in a legal gray zone across multiple jurisdictions," she said. "That is not a clerical matter. That is an existential one." The room temperature seemed to physically drop. "We've also noted," she continued, glancing at a document, "that your Nevada license lapsed 9 days ago, and your Singapore-Delaware disclosures do not appear in the relevant regulatory registry. Can you confirm who submitted those updates?" No one spoke. "Our counsel couldn't locate them," she said, "which suggests they were either missed or never filed." Marcus, who had not spoken in 20 minutes, finally looked up from the table. His gaze moved slowly to Derek. It was not the look of a man who was angry. It was the look of a man who had just understood something he could not take back. Eliza closed the folder gently. "That will be all for now. We'll reconvene after our legal team has reviewed the implications." The screen went dark. "No goodbye. No plaisanteries. Just absence." Derek turned toward the room, color draining. It's fine. We can refile. I'll get on the phone, Will. Marcus raised one hand. Flat palm. Still. Derek went quiet. In the corner, Lydia opened her phone. Vivian's name was still in her contacts. She did not press it. Not yet. The first system alerts hit at 7:04 a.m. Singapore time. Within 12 minutes, Eliza Fong's legal team had issued a formal hold on the Series D transaction. Within 23 licenses, Nevada, California, and Delaware had automatically entered pending audit status. Colorado filed a notice of regulatory absence. And one particularly meticulous regulator in New Jersey added a comment to the public record that would, by 8:01 a.m., make it onto the newswire. No record of legal signatory found. Operations halted pending investigation. The morning that was supposed to be the company's triumph became something else entirely. The boardroom screen, which 48 hours earlier had displayed upward curving projections and green checkmarks, now showed a grid of red error boxes. Unauthorized signatory. Jurisdictional licensing pending audit. Bond verification inactive. Derek paced the length of the room, hands on his head, voice cracking. We filed everything. We onboard the vendors. I saw the dashboards. He turned on Lydia. Why didn't someone tell me the bond was person-specific? Lydia looked at him with the particular exhaustion of someone who had said exactly that, multiple times, to a person who hadn't been listening. Someone did tell you. The IT director appeared in the doorway, face the color of printer paper. We've been asked to suspend all interstate lending activity in 3 states until we can demonstrate regulatory continuity. Our payment systems are auto-freezing anything connected to those licenses. What does that mean? Derek demanded. It means, Lydia said, picking up her bag, you're shut down. She walked out without looking back. The helpline went to a recorded message about higher than normal call volume. 5 enterprise clients had reported failed transactions before 9:30 a.m. A mid-size lender in Reno was threatening legal action. Someone on the risk team was crying quietly into their keyboard. Derek had 3 browsers open simultaneously. Vivian's LinkedIn, an outdated phone number that no longer worked, and a Google search for urgent state-level compliance recovery no signatory. He typed a text message. Karen, I'm sorry. Please. We need to talk. I'll do whatever it takes. Come back, please. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then, you can no longer message this recipient. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he set the phone down and said very quietly, find her. Call her lawyer. Offer her equity. Cash. I don't care. Find her. Mitchell, the CFO, who had been sitting in silence for the better part of an hour, looked up finally. His voice was hollow. You fired the one person who told us this would happen. No one answered. Because every person in that room knew it was true. Vivian had not left a mess. She had simply stopped cleaning up theirs. Across the city, in a quiet office with no logo on the door, Vivian sat at a wooden table with a chipped tea mug in hand, watching a private dashboard she had coded herself years ago. It pulled from regulatory feeds, license verification portals, and a monitoring system she had built in her own syntax, the kind of thing you build when you have spent a decade being the only person paying attention. The alerts multiplied. 3 red flags became 5. 5 became 9. She took a sip of tea. Still hot. Renata leaned over her shoulder, watching the screen refresh. You seeing this? Delaware just went dark, Vivian said. Nevada was the spark. Delaware is the accelerant. Colorado will call within the hour. Renata was quiet for a moment. Then, unable to help herself, Derek, is probably having an actual breakdown right now. Vivian didn't reply. She was watching the structure she had built collapse with the precision of a controlled demolition. Not rage. Not fire. Precision. Every failure unfolding exactly as she had calculated the moment they told her to pack her desk. A new notification appeared on screen. Cross-border data transfer review initiated. All transactions frozen. She clicked it open, read it once and smiled. The emergency call came before the market bell. Eliza Fong's office had not requested a meeting. They had required one. Full executive team, board members and legal present. You won't need a prep deck, the email said. You need a witness. The boardroom filled again with the same glass walls and the same chairs, but the air felt different. Vacuum-sealed in dread. No coffee, no croissants. Just silence and the particular smell of people who had not slept. Eliza appeared on screen, composed and unhurried. 3 lawyers visible behind her. 2 live regulatory dashboards running on monitors to her left. She looked at the faces before her the way a surgeon looks at a scan. Before we address the investor hold, she began, I need to understand one thing. Is it accurate that you terminated the only person who held active legal authority over your cross-jurisdictional compliance structure? Marcus opened his mouth. Derek started to interject. Eliza raised one finger. They both stopped. I don't need to understand why you let her go, she continued. I need to understand that you did, and that not a single person on this call understood what she actually was. Mitchell cleared his throat. We've since reconsidered. We've reached out. And what did Ms. Calloway say? Eliza asked. Silence. We've offered full reinstatement, Marcus said at last, the words coming out like something that had cost him a great deal to say. Title restoration. Retroactive equity. Whatever she needs. There was a knock at the boardroom door. A courier entered with a single thick envelope, placed it on the table without a word, and left. Marcus reached for it with the careful hesitation of a man who already sensed what was inside. He slid the documents out and read. His expression did not change immediately. Then slowly something behind his eyes shifted. The look of a man watching a door close and understanding finally that it will not open again. He turned the paper so the room could see. A formal declination of reinstatement. And beneath it a second document stamped, signed and filed across 5 states. Transfer of regulatory bondholder authority. Entity VC Compliance Partners, LLC. Owner and founding principal Vivian Calloway. The document was accompanied by a letter from the Department of Financial Institutions recognizing the new entity as the legal signatory for all operations currently frozen under the prior structure. Eliza looked at the documents for a long moment. Then something almost warm entered her expression. That resolves the signatory question. She looked directly into the camera. Please inform Ms. Calloway that we will be transferring our compliance contracts to her new firm. Effective immediately. I look forward to working with her team. The screen went dark. Nobody moved. Marcus lowered the letter slowly and set it on the table. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. She didn't take it. Derek blinked. What? She didn't take anything from us, Marcus said, eyes fixed on the middle distance. We gave it to her. We handed her the leverage the moment we told her to pack her box. And then the door opened. Vivian Calloway walked in. Not to negotiate. Not to gloat. Not to demand anything from people who had already given her everything she needed. She walked in composed, unhurried, dressed with the quiet precision of someone who has always known exactly who they are even when the room around them refused to see it. She crossed to the table, set down a single business card and spoke. That line is for expedited filings, she said. We respond within 1 business hour. She turned and walked out. The click of her heels down the marble hallway was the last sound in the room for a very long time. Because here is the thing they never understood. The thing that executives like Derek and CEOs like Marcus rarely take time to learn about the quiet, meticulous, unglamorous people who keep the machinery running. The most powerful person in any organization is not the one whose name is on the press releases. It is not the one who gives the presentations or plants the flags or takes the photos at the gala dinner. The most powerful person is the one who knows where every structural load is carried. The one who understands precisely what happens when each beam is removed. Vivian had never needed them to see her. She had never asked for recognition or applause or a feature in a company newsletter. She had simply done the work, documented the work, and built, quietly and carefully, a position so foundational that the moment she walked out of it, the entire structure had no choice but to follow her. They called it a legacy function. They called her obsolete. They called it an agile pivot toward the future. What they had actually done was fire the architect and assume the building would hold. It didn't. And she was ready. For 12 years, Vivian Calloway had been the invisible spine of a company that never once thought to say thank you. In the end, she didn't need the thank you. She needed one thing, the door. And they gave it to her. The rest was just execution.